These are a group of monsters with the heads of dogs and bodies of men. They are the death gods Anubis's army of death. After 5,000 years of slumber, they are once again waging war upon the world alongside their master. The pharaoh's guards, clad in black, gather on the battlefield, vowing not to let the army of death step 1 foot beyond the desert. What seems to be an unwinnable battle for the pharaoh's guards is met with a spirit of fighting to the death. As the battle begins, both sides charge and shout. Wherever the guards' scimitars strike, the enemies turn to yellow sand. In the face of their unwavering resolve, even the army of death seems to be terrified. They scatter and flee, and those who are surrounded turn into yellow sand as well. As the guards celebrate their victory, the enormous Scorpion King, who has been sleeping within a giant pyramid, awakens at this very moment. Soon, the guards see more of the army of death pouring in from a distance, this time overwhelming in number. Why does Anubis's army follow the Scorpion King's orders? And what has awakened him after 5,000 years? Over 5,000 years ago, an extraordinary figure emerged in ancient Egypt. He was 8 feet tall with a waist of 10 tails. With just a call, countless followers would rally to him. He was known in the underworld as the Scorpion King. The Scorpion King was a valiant warrior with a formidable army. He waged wars everywhere, determined to rule the world. But ancient wisdom says that warmongers are destined to perish. When he led his troops to attack the mighty city of Thebes, he faced fierce resistance from the regular army. His forces, unable to breach the city, laid siege for 7 years. In those 7 years of conflict, his ambition was thwarted. It was his first major defeat. To save his life, he retreated with his remaining troops to the sacred Ahm Shere desert. The harsh desert conditions, with scarce water and food, caused his once mighty soldiers to fall one by one. Eventually, only the Scorpion King remained alone. As he neared death, he still couldn't accept his fate. He swore to Anubis, the god of death, that if he could be saved and help reclaim Thebes, he would offer his soul. Remarkably, the god of death agreed and sent him a scorpion for sustenance. The Scorpion King, despite his disgust, ate the scorpion and made the pact with the god of death. In the next moment, under the god's divine power, lush vegetation suddenly sprouted in the barren desert. Tall trees sprang up, covering miles in an instant. A dense oasis formed, and not only did the god of death give him new life, but he also granted him an army of death from the underworld. From then on, the Scorpion King was known as the Scorpion Emperor, leading Anubis's army of death. He was unstoppable. Even the mightiest city of Thebes couldn't resist the onslaught. Within half a day, the city fell, and no force could challenge him. The Scorpion Emperor finally achieved his goal, but at a cost. At the height of his triumph, the pact began to be fulfilled. Anubis, as promised, took his soul and dragged him to hell. All that remained was a golden bracelet lying on the ground, while the army of death dissolved into dust, returning to slumber beneath the sands until summoned again. Fast forward 5,000 years, and O'Connell and archaeologist Evelyn, with their son Alex, returned to this place. After their adventure in Egypt in the previous film, O'Connell and Evelyn returned to London, married, and had a chubby little boy. The family lived happily, but recently, Evelyn had been dreaming of the pharaoh's tomb, as if it were a memory from a past life. Believing the mummy incident was a sign, Evelyn was determined to uncover the truth. The family returned to Egypt to explore the pharaoh's tomb from her dreams. During their research, Alex noticed that the patterns on the tomb walls were very similar to the tattoos on his father's arm. O'Connell, dismissive of the coincidence, let his son guard the entrance while he and Evelyn went deeper to search for treasure. However, Evelyn, familiar with the terrain, quickly found an entrance to a burial chamber. When O'Connell violently smashed open the stone door, he saw that the floor was covered in scorpions and human bones. Though it was not new to Evelyn, the familiar sight gave her a sense of coming home. Guided by her memory, she unknowingly opened the main door of the tomb. As O'Connell entered the mummy's tomb, Evelyn suddenly felt a wave of dizziness. Everything around her suddenly changed, and in a daze, she saw a vision of her past life. In a lavishly decorated chamber, a mysterious box sat between two strong guards. She could clearly see the code to unlock the chamber, but when O'Connell approached, the vision vanished. The structure of the pharaoh's tomb was almost identical to what Evelyn had seen in her dreams. She even faintly felt that she had been here in ancient times, but her husband O'Connell didn't believe her. Yet, Evelyn effortlessly opened the door, leaving O'Connell completely astonished. At that moment, 3 mercenaries received their orders and also arrived at the site. Alex, hiding in the shadows, overheard their conversation and discovered they were there to target his father. The leader ordered his men to stay behind in the temple, but he himself intended to kill O'Connell. Mischievous Alex hid and used a slingshot to play a trick on them. Terrified, they thought it was some kind of curse, while Alex giggled to himself. But when he tried the same trick again, he was caught, and the man was ready to teach him a lesson. Inside the chamber, they brushed aside cobwebs and saw the emblem of the Scorpion King, and there, they found a mysterious box also marked with the Scorpion King's emblem. Driven by curiosity, Evelyn opened the box using the same method. Inside was none other than the legendary bracelet of Anubis. It was said that whoever possessed the bracelet could summon the Scorpion King and, by killing him, gain control of the powerful army of Anubis. Just as the mercenary leader found them and was about to shoot, the chamber suddenly shook violently. Terrified, the mercenary leader fled. O'Connell realized it might be a curse and quickly examined the surface of the box. Sure enough, there was an inscription that read, "Whoever opens this box will be drowned by the waters of the Nile." Before he could finish reading, the walls collapsed, and a massive flood from the Nile burst into the tomb, blocking the couple's escape. The three mercenaries, too scared to deal with Alex, hurriedly fled. As he left, the man angrily kicked down the scaffolding, hoping to trap the boy. O'Connell grabbed Evelyn, and they frantically ran through the tomb, but in the end, they were cornered by the floodwaters, and the entire underground palace was submerged by the Nile, trapping the couple who were quickly engulfed by the waters. Just as they were about to drown, their son, who had been standing guard outside, experienced his first true crisis and, quite accidentally, saved the day. By pure luck, Alex knocked over a large stone pillar in the temple. The falling pillars triggered a chain reaction, with the final one breaking through the tomb's wall, allowing the water to flow out and rescuing his trapped parents. However, the couple didn't realize that after they entered the chamber, three mercenaries had followed, watching their every move. Far away, at the ruins of the City of the Dead, a construction team was busy digging. The project had three overseers: the curator of the British Museum, the head of security, and the reincarnation of Anksunamun. Anksunamun's reincarnation shared a unique trait with Evelyn. They could both recall memories from their past lives. Under Anksunamun's precise guidance, they successfully uncovered the Book of the Dead and the Book of Ammonius Ra. Though O'Connell had killed and buried the high priest, Anksunamun still sought to resurrect him. Meanwhile, the three mercenaries arrived at the ruins to report back to their employer, but as soon as they stepped out of the car, the entire City of the Dead began to tremble violently. The workers, who had been digging day and night, accidentally unearthed a swarm of flesh-eating scarabs. Terrified, everyone panicked and ran for their lives. Many were devoured by the scarabs, but Anksunamun smiled slightly, knowing this meant she was close to finding the high priest. Her men used flamethrowers to drive away the scarabs, allowing the workers to continue digging. As predicted, they soon unearthed a massive piece of amber. The curator was ecstatic. Inside was the mummified high priest, who had been sealed there 3,000 years ago. The curator, a devout follower of the high priest, had come here with the sole intention of resurrecting him. They also wanted to awaken the Scorpion King and summon the army of Anubis. Their plan was to have the high priest kill the Scorpion King, take control of his army, and rule the world. But they were still missing one crucial item: the bracelet of Anubis. Only with the bracelet could they find and awaken the Scorpion King. However, the three mercenary brothers reported that they had not obtained the bracelet of Anubis and that it had likely been taken to London. Seeing that they failed their mission and were still causing trouble, the curator was not angry but instead assigned them a new task: to retrieve the box that once contained the Book of the Dead. This was because, after the high priest's resurrection, he would need to consume the flesh of the one who opened the box to restore his body and powers, so he could kill the Scorpion King. Upon learning that the bracelet of Anubis was now in O'Connell's possession, the curator decided to personally lead the mission to seize it. O'Connell and his family had returned to their mansion in London, unaware that danger was approaching. While his parents were distracted, Alex secretly opened the box and put on the flashy bracelet of Anubis. To his surprise, the moment he put it on, the bracelet projected a holographic map. It swiftly passed through the Ahm Shere desert and its oasis, leaving Alex stunned as it seemed to be guiding him. The image eventually froze, stopping at the Scorpion King's lair, but he didn't realize that wearing the bracelet of Anubis would cause the Scorpion King to awaken within 7 days. Alex, knowing he'd made a huge mistake, tried to take off the bracelet but found that it was firmly fixed to his wrist and wouldn't come off. Fearing his mother's scolding, Alex hastily placed a figurine inside the box to cover his tracks. Meanwhile, O'Connell and Evelyn were enjoying a quiet moment when they discovered a strange woman's lingerie in the house. O'Connell immediately thought of Jonathan, and sure enough, Jonathan had brought a woman home. Just as he was boasting to the woman, the curator and his men burst in. They mistook Jonathan for O'Connell and interrogated him about the whereabouts of the bracelet of Anubis. The curator snatched the golden staff from Jonathan's hand, recognizing it as the legendary Spear of Judgment. Dressed seductively, Anck-su-namun entered the room and pulled out an Egyptian cobra from a box. After kissing the snake, she brought it close to Jonathan, threatening him for information about the bracelet. Jonathan, terrified and clueless, closed his eyes and braced for death. At the critical moment, O'Connell arrived just in time to find Jonathan being held at knife point by a group of red-clad assassins. Realizing they'd mistaken Jonathan for O'Connell, Anck-su-namun threw the venomous snake at O'Connell. The red-clad assassin hurled a blade, but O'Connell turned the tables and defeated him in the same move. Impressed by O'Connell's skills, another assassin grabbed a machine gun and opened fire wildly. Under the barrage of heavy fire, O'Connell was forced to dodge, while Jonathan managed to reclaim his Spear of Judgment amid the chaos. The captain and his men cornered Evelyn, intending to take the bracelet of Anubis from her. Evelyn drew her sword, protecting her son, but at the crucial moment, the pharaoh's tomb guards, who had been in hiding, revealed themselves and engaged the red-clad assassins in battle. Since her journey in Egypt, Evelyn had learned some hand-to-hand combat skills. Seeing this, the captain drew his blade and faced off with one of the tomb guards, quickly gaining the upper hand. Despite Evelyn's best efforts, she was overwhelmed, and both she and the box were carried off by the enemies. As his men succeeded, the captain slashed his opponent and made a stylish exit. But what they didn't know was that the bracelet of Anubis was actually on Evelyn's son. With O'Connell and Jonathan pinned down by enemy fire, they had no choice but to jump out of a window to escape. Seeing Evelyn and the box being taken away, O'Connell was frantic and tried to pursue them but was forced back by gunfire. When O'Connell noticed the tomb guards, he vented his frustration on them, believing they were responsible for the trouble. The tomb guards then revealed the curator's plan to resurrect the high priest and rule the world. As everyone worried, Alex rolled up his sleeve, revealing that the bracelet was still on his wrist, reassuring them. But the tomb guard warned O'Connell that whoever wears the bracelet must reach the pyramid of Ahm Shere within 7 days, or Anubis would claim his son's soul. O'Connell decided they would first go to the British Museum to rescue his wife and stop the curator's plan. They soon arrived at the museum. Before they launched their rescue mission, the tomb guard noticed the tattoo on O'Connell's arm and told him it was the mark of the pharaoh's bodyguard. This meant that O'Connell was a descendant of the pharaoh's guards, but O'Connell heard his words and refused to acknowledge his connection with the pharaoh's guards. He grabbed his weapon, ready to save his wife. Meanwhile, in the Egyptian artifacts section of the museum, Evelyn was tightly bound and carried to the altar, surrounded by a group of devoted worshippers. The curator, holding the Book of the Dead, was conducting the summoning ritual, chanting incantations in a loud voice. In the next second, a mummy broke free from the amber before them. It was none other than the bold and fearless high priest of ancient Egypt, Imhotep, resurrected once again in his mummy form. As Imhotep regained consciousness, he found the surroundings unfamiliar. The curator, upon seeing Imhotep, immediately called him father, saying now was the perfect time to kill the Scorpion King, which would give them control over the army of Anubis and allow them to rule the world. He had even prepared 2 grand gifts for Imhotep. The first was Imhotep's beloved woman from long ago, Anck-su-namun. Evelyn, still bound, once again saw visions from the past. The graceful woman in front of her transformed into the image of the Egyptian queen. It turned out that she was the reincarnation of Anck-su-namun, the pharaoh's consort. Anck-su-namun walked up to Imhotep, and they gazed into each other's eyes with deep affection. Seeing the reincarnation of Anck-su-namun made Imhotep even happier. Now, he could finally achieve both his ambitions and his love. Although this was only Anck-su-namun's physical reincarnation, he was confident he would eventually summon her soul back from the underworld. This time, no one could stop them from being together forever. The second grand gift was the bracelet of Anubis, but when the curator and the captain excitedly opened the box, they were shocked to find that the bracelet had been switched. Furious, they realized Alex must have been the one to steal it. Luckily, they had kidnapped Evelyn, so their efforts weren't entirely in vain. To stir things up, Anck-su-namun ordered her men to burn Evelyn alive, knowing that Imhotep had a grudge against Evelyn and would be pleased to watch her burn. Just as Evelyn was about to be thrown into the fire pit, O'Connell arrived just in time, leaping forward and rescuing his wife from the flames. At the same time, the Medjay warriors accompanying O'Connell pulled out machine guns and started firing at Imhotep and his followers. The scene instantly became chaotic. and Imhotep locked eyes with O'Connell, his enemy. Rage boiled between them. Without hesitation, O'Connell shot Imhotep twice and then handed the gun to Evelyn. Together, they mowed down their enemies. The Medjai's only mission was to prevent Imhotep's resurrection, but their bullets couldn't kill him. The three of them had no choice but to retreat, furious at the uselessness of his followers. Imhotep grabbed a mystical artifact and cast a spell. He summoned his mummy guards to chase down O'Connell and his group. Fortunately, when they reached the museum exit, Jonathan arrived with a double-decker bus to rescue them. As it turned out, Jonathan had heard the fighting and, in his panic to start the car, had accidentally broken the key. So, they had no choice but to flee in the stolen bus. For powerful mummies burst through the walls and pursued O'Connell and his group. Shockingly, the mummies on foot were faster than the bus. O'Connell, seeing this, tried to use firepower to stop them, but the mummies didn't follow the normal rules, bouncing and leaping over obstacles with incredible speed. Equally surprising was the full-force assault by O'Connell and the Medjai warriors. They barely managed to blow up two of the mummies, but the remaining ones continued their relentless pursuit. The group found themselves trapped, as the mummies quickly caught up with the bus and stormed inside, launching a brutal assault on the Medjai warriors. Even worse, the mummies were strong enough to tear the bus apart with their bare hands. O'Connell didn't even have time to reload before he was pinned down by a mummy. The mummy picked up O'Connell and slammed him around. Meanwhile, the Medjai on the lower deck were also struggling. A mummy had viciously attacked one of them, leaving him covered in wounds and on the verge of death. Fortunately, Evelyn acted fast, grabbing O'Connell's gun and unloading several rounds into the mummy, turning it to dust. On the upper deck, O'Connell was still fighting alone, but this last mummy was difficult to defeat. O'Connell gave everything he had, but nothing could hurt the mummy. Just as he was about to collapse, he noticed a bridge ahead and quickly ducked down. The mummy, along with the roof of the bus, crashed into the bridge, finally giving O'Connell a moment of relief. With the mummies dealt with, the rescue mission was a success. Just as Alex thought he could finally rest, the captain appeared from behind and kidnapped him. O'Connell gave chase, but they got away, leaving him devastated as he collapsed on the bridge. Crying in frustration, the Medjai reassured him, saying the captain's goal was only the bracelet of Anubis. The bracelet revealed a new location on the map each time they arrived somewhere, so Alex was still safe for now. Only the person wearing the bracelet could follow its guidance. It became clear that the kidnappers planned to use Alex and the bracelet to find the Scorpion King's pyramid. In addition, the curator accidentally discovered that Jonathan possessed the Spear of Osiris, which could subdue Imhotep. But for Imhotep, once he regained his powers, he would no longer fear the weapon. After saying this, he couldn't resist kissing the reincarnation of Anxunamun. Imhotep and his group then took Alex on a train bound for the ancient city of Karnak. Alex, wanting to buy time for his parents to rescue him, was brought before Imhotep, as he was the one chosen by the bracelet of Anubis. Imhotep didn't plan to kill him. Instead, he revealed the truth of the curse. If Alex didn't reach the pyramid of Ahm Shere within 7 days of the bracelet's activation, his soul would be taken by the bracelet. Now, only 5 days remained. To ensure the boy cooperated, Imhotep removed his mask. Imhotep also had a weakness only the army of Anubis could compensate for it. However, in his current mummy form, Imhotep was not fully resurrected and needed to retrieve the Book of the Dead to fully restore his powers, which would only happen by draining the life of whoever opened the chest. The three mercenary brothers completed their task and retrieved the chest containing the Book of the Dead. Though it had a curse, whoever opened it would die. One of the men dared not open it, but the greedy eldest brother wanted to raise the price or sell the chest to someone else. Seeing how difficult they were being, Anxunamun tricked them into entering Imhotep's room to collect their reward. While they were distracted, she shut the door, and Imhotep jumped out, terrifying them. In their panic, they shot at Imhotep, but their bullets did nothing to harm him. Much to his amusement, one of them, terrified, tried to flee, but Anxunamun tricked him into opening the chest, telling him that Imhotep would let him go. Foolishly, the mercenary opened the chest, releasing Imhotep's powers. Following the curse, Imhotep devoured their flesh and blood, fully restoring his body and limitless powers. After his feast, Anxunamun returned and saw that Imhotep had transformed into a handsome bald man, causing her heart to race. To reach the destination ahead of Imhotep, O'Connell sought out his old Air Force friend to fly a homemade aircraft into the desert to save his son, Alex. The Air Force friend initially refused to get involved, having been tricked by O'Connell before and not wanting to risk his life again. But this time, O'Connell bribed him with Jonathan's Spear of Osiris, convincing him to join the mission. To ensure the plan's success, the Medjai summoned the captain of the pharaoh's guard to accompany them. Once the Scorpion King was awakened, the army of Anubis would return to the world. They needed to prepare by gathering all forces to fight Anubis' army. Their method of communication was through the Medjai's pet eagle. They then took off in a hot air balloon, sailing under the stars as if navigating the ocean. Okamel promised Evelyn that he would bring their son back. Meanwhile, Imhotep's group traveled by train across the desert to the city of Karnak. Alex caused trouble in front of the captain, who was fed up but still needed Alex's guidance and couldn't kill him. Using the excuse of needing to use the bathroom, Alex distracted the captain. He found a large hole beneath the toilet, moved the seat, and pulled the emergency brake, escaping through the hole. By now, Imhotep's powers had grown stronger. He casually grabbed two of his men and tested his abilities, then easily teleported to Alex's side, capturing him once more. He then brought Anxunamen into the city of Karnak, though she only had fragments of her past life memories. Imhotep, unsatisfied, began using magic to restore all of Anxunamen's memories from her previous life. Meanwhile, Evelyn, on the hot air balloon, became dizzy again, also affected by the magic. Her past life memories slowly resurfaced. Two Egyptian women in revealing outfits, armed with weapons and wearing golden masks, were engaged in an intense and seductive duel in the temple. At first, they were evenly matched, but one woman used her agile legs to kick the other in the head, knocking her down, quickly winning the first round. Even the pharaoh applauded, and the woman lying on the ground lifted her mask, revealing it was Evelyn. It turned out Evelyn's past life was the daughter of the pharaoh, and the other woman was Anxunamen, the pharaoh's most beloved concubine. Evelyn and Anxunamen had always been bitter rivals. This duel was for the right to guard the bracelet of Anubis. Unwilling to concede, Evelyn engaged Anxunamen again. Despite changing weapons several times, Evelyn was still no match for Anxunamen. In the end, she suffered a heavy over-the-shoulder throw from Anxunamen, losing the battle. This exciting and thrilling fight ended with Evelyn defeated by Anxunamen, but she remained her father's most trusted person, tasked with guarding the bracelet of Anubis. This was also why Evelyn was able to find the bracelet of Anubis so easily. At that time, Anxunamen and Imhotep were already showing signs of an unusual relationship. Evelyn's instincts as a woman told her something was going on between them. Sure enough, that night, Evelyn discovered Imhotep and Anxunamen secretly meeting in the pharaoh's chamber. It clearly wasn't their first time. When the pharaoh learned of this, he planned to catch them in the act. However, the two, with nothing to lose, decided to assassinate him. Evelyn witnessed the whole thing and rushed to alert the pharaoh's guard, but sadly, her father was still killed by the two. To cover Imhotep's escape, Anxunamen chose to commit suicide. In the end, Imhotep couldn't escape either, being turned into a mummy and cursed with the most terrible of curses. It turned out the grudge between these three had been sealed 3,000 years ago. This painful memory overwhelmed Evelyn, causing her to fall from the aircraft. Fortunately, Okamel caught her just in time, saving her. With these long-buried memories now resurfaced, Imhotep used the Book of the Dead to successfully summon Anxunamen's soul from the underworld back into her body. Anxunamen fully regained her memories, and their love became as unwavering as it was in their past life. But this ritual had an unexpected side effect. It awakened all of Evelyn's memories from her past life. Evelyn was the reincarnated princess and the guardian of the bracelet of Anubis. Okamel, on the other hand, was the guard assigned to escort the princess, and their son, Alex, was the guide chosen by the bracelet of Anubis, leading them to the oasis of Ahm Shere. Alex, shackled in chains, had no chance to escape, but he was clever, pretending to agree to guide Imhotep while secretly leaving clues along the way. Believing his parents would surely rescue him, the group finally found Imhotep's train but discovered it was already abandoned. They had taken Alex and were walking toward their destination. Evelyn quickly spotted the clues left by her son, and sure enough, the bracelet of Anubis acted like a holographic guide, leading them step by step to the Scorpion King's lair. Alex used sandcastles to mark each stop, allowing his parents to track him. These holographic images were of ancient ruins, and since Evelyn was an expert in archaeology, they were able to precisely follow Imhotep's group. The Medjai also sent these messages via falcon to the other captains. The escort army followed closely behind Imhotep's group. A few days later, guided by the bracelet of Anubis, Imhotep's group was nearing the Scorpion King's oasis. They only had to pass through a canyon to reach their destination, but when Imhotep looked up, he saw Okamel and his team flying towards them. Alex was just about to leave his final clue when the captain caught him. Furious, the captain grabbed Alex, but Imhotep didn't care. He stood in the river, preparing a powerful attack to properly deal with O'Connell and his crew. With a surge of power, the river formed a 100-foot-tall water wall. With a single push, the water rushed back up the canyon towards O'Connell's airship. On the airship, everyone exchanged nervous glances as an eerie calm surrounded them. The pilot was on high alert and, when he turned, saw the massive wave barreling towards them. Just before they were swallowed by the wave, the pilot slammed the throttle, pushing the airship to its limits. Smoke trailed behind them as they barely escaped the canyon. By chance, they arrived at Ahm Shere, and through binoculars, O'Connell spotted a pyramid in the oasis, which likely held the Scorpion King's tomb. But before they could act, Imhotep summoned the tsunami again. The pilot tried the same maneuver, but this time, they were running low on fuel. The airship couldn't outrun the wave and was eventually swallowed by it. The group crashed into the oasis, but luckily, everyone survived. The airship, however, was damaged and needed repairs. O'Connell left the pilot to fix it while the rest continued towards the oasis to rescue Alex. Jonathan, ever the opportunist, quietly swiped the spear of Osiris before they left. The Medjai sent out a message with his falcon, just before being shot by the captain. At O'Connell's urging, the Medjai decided to help O'Connell rescue his son first, then personally inform the 12 Medjai captains. On the 6th night, Imhotep's group entered Ahm Shere and approached the pyramid at the center of the oasis. O'Connell's group planned a surprise attack under the cover of night. Evelyn and Jonathan stayed behind to provide support from the high ground. Unaware that the oasis was full of danger, near the pyramid, the ground was teeming with dwarf mummies, the ancient guardians of the oasis. Imhotep's followers were the first to be attacked. Before they knew what was happening, they were dragged underground one by one and killed. Hearing the commotion, O'Connell and the Medjai rushed forward. The dwarf mummies, fearing Imhotep's immense power, didn't dare approach him. Imhotep abandoned everyone and rushed towards the pyramid with Anxunaman. The rest of the group wasn't as fortunate and were picked off. Terrified and in complete disarray, the more panicked they were, the worse things became. Some were hit by poison darts fired by the dwarf mummies, while others fell into swamps. The mummies were unstoppable, shrieking with excitement as they tore through Imhotep's followers, leaving O'Connell with no choice but to press on. Amid the chaos, Alex broke free and hid in the bushes. O'Connell and the Medjai charged into the fray, while Evelyn and Jonathan provided cover from the shadows. The captain caught up to Alex and was about to strike when O'Connell leaped out, grabbed his son, and sprinted away. The Medjai stayed behind to settle his score with the captain. In a swift, vengeful strike, the Medjai sent the captain to his death, then set off to inform the 12 Medjai captains. The curator, shocked that his army had been decimated before even reaching the pyramid, was the only one left standing. O'Connell, carrying his son, sprinted as the dwarf mummies chased after them. He quickly turned and fired his gun. After a fierce battle, the family was finally reunited, but before they could celebrate, Alex delivered bad news. The bracelet of Anubis had already chosen its master. If he didn't reach the pyramid before dawn, he would be doomed. At that moment, the persistent dwarf mummies attacked once more. The entire family was chased across a narrow bridge, but even after crossing to the other side, they couldn't shake their pursuers. O'Connell lit a stick of dynamite and tossed it back, intending to blow up the bridge. One of the mummies caught it, mistaking it for a torch, and the others scrambled to grab it. Suddenly, the dynamite exploded, cutting the bridge in half and sending the charred mummies plummeting into the canyon. But the danger wasn't over yet. It was almost dawn, the 7th day. If they didn't get Alex inside the pyramid before sunrise, the bracelet's curse would take his life. O'Connell wasted no time, throwing his son over his shoulder and sprinting towards the pyramid with the speed of an Olympic runner. The sunlight was shrinking fast, and O'Connell held his son close, dodging it as best as he could. They were just a hair's breadth away from being engulfed in the light when, at the last second, they dashed inside the Scorpion King's tomb, barely escaping with their lives. With the curse lifted, the bracelet of Anubis unlocked itself from Alex's wrist, and he immediately threw the cursed thing away. Evelyn, arriving shortly after, breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing her son safe. It looked like the family could finally go home in peace, but unexpectedly, Imhotep and Anxunaman arrived right behind them. Anxunaman, still holding on to her grudge from her past life, suddenly stabbed Evelyn from behind, hitting a vital spot. Evelyn didn't even have time to react. O'Connell, seeing this, rushed out in a frenzy, but it was too late. After getting her revenge, Anxunaman left with Imhotep. They strolled leisurely into the pyramid, heading straight for the Scorpion King's chamber. O'Connell watched helplessly as his wife lay on the ground, slowly losing her life. The family, who had just been reunited, was once again plunged into sorrow as O'Connell held his wife's body, unable to shed a single tear. But now wasn't the time for mourning. He knew the most important task was to stop the Scorpion King's resurrection. Resolute, O'Connell charged into the pyramid. Meanwhile, the curator found the discarded bracelet of Anubis and picked it up. Ecstatic, he ventured into an underground chamber. Arriving at the Scorpion King's tomb, he put on the bracelet of Anubis, using it to drive away the flesh-eating scarabs, and soon discovered the sealed Scorpion King. Determined to fulfill his dream of world domination, the curator decided to awaken the Scorpion King himself. He placed the bracelet of Anubis into the Scorpion King's statue, and the seal was immediately broken. The once dark tomb transformed into solid gold. A mysterious force spread through the corridors, reaching the exterior of the pyramid, where a giant black scorpion hovered in the sky, signaling the imminent return of the great Scorpion King. The skies and earth began to shift, and the shadow of a colossal scorpion enveloped the entire desert. The Magi, who had anticipated this, had already gathered a massive army of Pharaoh's guards to protect Egypt's peace. The curator was still reveling in the success of awakening the Scorpion King when he suddenly felt excruciating pain and screamed in agony. He hadn't expected the resurrection to require his flesh and blood. As a sacrifice, his hand was being devoured, leaving only bare bones. Fortunately, the awakening ritual was successful, and the army of Anubis was the first to rise. The dog-headed soldiers of Anubis, now reanimated, squared off against the Magi-led guard army. As Imhotep stepped into the throne room, he initially planned to use his magic to defeat the Scorpion King, but then, the god Anubis suddenly stripped him of his powers. Under the curse of the god, all mortals had to face the Scorpion King as mere humans if they wished to command the army of Anubis. It was clear that to lead the million-strong army of Anubis, they had to fight as humans. Anxunamun tried to convince Imhotep to give up, but driven by ambition, Imhotep refused to back down. He had to fight, not just for his future with Anxunamun, but for the power he craved. Fearlessly, Imhotep charged forward to challenge the Scorpion King. Meanwhile, Jonathan comforted Alex, telling him that his mother had gone to a better place, just like the book said. Hearing that, Alex suddenly remembered that the Book of the Dead was in Anxunamun's possession. If they could retrieve it, they could bring his mother back to life. So, he urged his uncle to carry his mother's body into the Scorpion King's tomb and find Anxunamun. Jonathan, swinging his fist at Anxunamun, distracted her while Alex quietly swiped the Book of the Dead and began chanting the spell to summon his mother's soul. Evelyn, now revived, told Jonathan to take Alex and leave, while she stayed behind to settle her past life grudge with Anxunamun. The two women squared off once again, but this time the outcome was different. Evelyn slashed Anxunamun's face, quickly gaining the upper hand. Anxunamun, unwilling to continue the fight, turned and fled. Meanwhile, Imhotep was banging on the doors of the Scorpion King's chamber, challenging him to a duel. Hearing the noise, O'Connell rushed in, seething with rage. Without a word, he swung a massive axe at Imhotep. The two engaged in a fierce battle. Even though Imhotep had lost his magical powers, his physical strength was still formidable. For a while, the fight was evenly matched. At the same time, outside the pyramid, the Magi and the army of Anubis clashed in an all-out war. Millions of soldiers fought fiercely, with the Anubis warriors turning to dust when defeated, but they were still able to inflict damage with their axes. The battle raged intensely outside while the fight inside the pyramid was equally fierce. But then, the doors of the Scorpion King's chamber slowly opened, revealing a creature with the upper body of a man and the lower body of a scorpion. He was the Scorpion King. Now, having evolved into a half-human, half-beast monster, he was clearly not someone to be trifled with. Whoever could defeat him would gain command of Anubis' million-strong army. To everyone's surprise, Imhotep suddenly knelt down. Using his knowledge of the ancient language, Imhotep told the Scorpion King that O'Connell was there to challenge him, and that he, Imhotep, would gladly serve as the Scorpion King's loyal servant. The Scorpion King turned his gaze toward O'Connell. Unable to withstand the Scorpion King's immense power, O'Connell was forced to fight and retreat at the same time. Using his agility, O'Connell dodged and evaded the Scorpion King, only to stumble upon the unlucky curator. The Scorpion King, ruthless and brutal, grabbed the curator without hesitation. Even in death, the curator remained loyal to Imhotep. But Imhotep didn't care about his fate. The poor curator, after all his efforts to revive the Scorpion King, ended up being torn apart. Outside the pyramid, the Pharaoh's guards continued to battle the army of Anubis. Each guard fought valiantly, and soon they defeated the army of Anubis. Just as they were ready to celebrate, A massive disturbance caught the Medjai's attention. Looking beyond the hill, they were shocked to see another wave of the Anubis army charging toward them, larger than before. It turned out that the previous wave had only been a vanguard. The main army was now descending like a flood. If this continued, they would all either be killed or exhausted to death. The only way to stop it was to kill the Scorpion King. While evading the Scorpion King, O'Connell stumbled upon a wall carving and realized that he was indeed a descendant of the Pharaoh's guards. The prophecy said that only the spear of Osiris could kill the Scorpion King, and coincidentally, Jonathan had the very spear in his possession. Even more fortuitous, Jonathan showed up at that moment with the spear. O'Connell quickly explained the spear's purpose to his brother-in-law, but before they could act, the Scorpion King resumed his pursuit. At the same time, the second wave of the Anubis army launched their attack, swarming the battlefield once again. The Pharaoh's guards, now facing overwhelming numbers, were prepared to die in battle. Inside the pyramid, O'Connell was still being chased by the Scorpion King when his revived wife arrived. Energized by her return, O'Connell stopped running and faced the Scorpion King head-on, calling for Jonathan to throw him the Spear of Osiris, but Jonathan didn't know how to activate it. Fortunately, with Alex's help, they finally managed to unlock the spear and hurled it at the Scorpion King. Unexpectedly, Imhotep intercepted it mid-air. He had overheard their conversation earlier. Imhotep believed he was the chosen one to kill the Scorpion King, so he hurled the spear at him, but at the last second, O'Connell managed to snatch the spear from him. In a bold move, O'Connell drove the Spear of Osiris straight into the Scorpion King's chest. Imhotep, frustrated beyond belief, realized that his dream of ruling the world had been shattered. O'Connell reclaimed control of the army of Anubis, commanding them to return to the underworld. The Scorpion King let out a furious roar as he disintegrated into a black cloud, and the army of Anubis outside the pyramid vanished with him, returning to the underworld. Cheers of victory echoed across the desert, but with the Scorpion King's death, a massive black vortex formed over the oasis, threatening to swallow everything. The pyramid began to crumble, and the ground split open, revealing a bottomless abyss that consumed the Scorpion King and his army. It also left O'Connell and Imhotep hanging on the edge of the cliff, while countless demonic spirits from the abyss below clung to them, trying to drag them into hell. It was a moment of ultimate test. Stones were falling all around them, and Evelyn and Anxunam. As Imhotep compared himself to the loving couple, O'Connell and Evelyn, he realized how thoroughly he had lost. His face was filled with sorrow, his eyes burning with anger, hurt, and a deep, tearless despair. The crushing weight of his defeat left him utterly broken, and in the end, he chose to let go, turning around and plunging into the endless abyss below. A love that had endured for 3,000 years ended in tragedy, but Anxunaman didn't escape for long. In her panic, she stumbled into a pit swarming with scorpions and lost her life. O'Connell and his family escaped the pyramid, only to discover that the oasis, due to the broken curse, was being reclaimed by the god Anubis, rapidly reverting back into a barren desert. The pyramid itself became like a black hole, devouring everything around it. It wouldn't be long before the family, too, would be swallowed by the desert. Despite their desperate race to the top of the pyramid, their efforts were in vain. The top was already sinking into the ground, leaving them with no way out. Just as all hope seemed lost, the pilot arrived in his hot air balloon just in time to rescue them. One by one, everyone climbed aboard, but Jonathan, the last to board, risked his life to steal a giant gemstone from the side of the pyramid. In the end, the group escaped safely, flying out of the desert, where they were greeted by the approaching Medjai riders. After exchanging farewells, the group began their journey home. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.